Hi everyone, today we're going to be going over a general overview for the SAT test. Make a note on this slide that for 2021, there are 4 remaining test dates that you could register for. The SAT this year is being given on June 5th, October 2nd, November 6th, and December 4th. And so those are the 4 remaining test dates for 2021 that you could register for. All right, so what is the SAT? The SAT is an entrance exam that's used by many colleges and universities to make admissions decisions. Make a note on this one that the SAT is required by some, but not all colleges. The SAT is a multiple choice test. It's used to measure a high school student's readiness for college. It also gives colleges one common data point that they can use to compare applicants when they're making admissions decisions. Most high school students will take the SAT during the spring of their junior year or the fall of their senior year. And a lot of students actually decide to take the test twice. So it can be to your benefit to take the test once junior year so that you can see how you do. It also gives you the summer to prepare to take the test again. Many colleges will do what's called super scoring your test. And so they'll take the highest of the sub-scores from your test if you take it more than once, even if they're not from the same time of taking the test. So it can be to your advantage to plan to take the test early enough that you have time to take it a second time before your college applications are due. The 2 main sections on the SAT are ELA and math, and they're broken down into 5 subsections. So there's 2 reading, writing, and language sections. And then today we're going to be talking about the 2 math sections, the no calculator and the calculator portion of the test. There's also an optional essay section that some colleges had previously required, but that section is going to be discontinued after June of this year. Make a note on this slide that you are required to bring your own calculator to use on the calculator portion of the math test. There are certain calculators that you can and can't use, so you definitely want to review the list of those on College Board's website. So when it comes to the SAT math test, there's 2 parts to the test. There's part of the test where you can use a calculator, and then there's part of the test where a calculator is not permitted. The calculator portion of the test has 38 questions, and the not calculator portion of the test has 20 questions. The SAT is a timed test, and you have 55 minutes total to complete the calculator portion of the SAT math test, and then 25 minutes total to complete the not calculator portion of the SAT math test. Although the test is split up into calculator and no calculator sections, all of the questions on the calculator section can be solved without using a calculator. Make a note on this one that there are actually some calculator questions that are solved more easily without using a calculator. Part of what you want to do when you're getting ready for the SAT math test is practice how a calculator can help you make certain computations more efficiently, but sometimes calculators can slow you down, and so you want to think about that while you're getting ready for the test. There are 2 question types on the SAT math test. There are multiple choice questions, and out of the 58 questions on the test, 45 of them are multiple choice questions. So the multiple choice questions make up about 78% of the questions on the test, so a little bit more than 3/4. So each multiple choice question has 1 question. It's followed by 4 answer options, and there's 1 correct answer to the question. So the SAT math test does not contain any select all that apply type questions like the SBAC test did. It's important to note that there is no penalty for selecting an incorrect answer, which means that you should provide an answer for every question on the test. You don't earn any points for a wrong answer, but they don't take any extra points away from you for a wrong answer. Make a note on this slide that says you should use multiple choice strategies like process of elimination to help you solve the multiple choice questions on the test. The second question type on the SAT math test are what is called gridded response questions. These are also called student-produced response or SPR questions. Out of the 58 questions on the test, 13 of them are gridded response questions, which means that they make up 22%, so a little bit less than 1/4 of the questions on the test. When you're doing these questions, there's not going to be multiple choice options. There's going to be grids like the ones that are seen over here to the right. So your job when you're answering these questions is to come up with the answer to the question. Your answer is always going to be a number, so either a fraction, a decimal, or a positive integer. So make a note here that you can't get any negative numbers. And then when you find your answer to the question, you're going to write your answer up top here on the lines, but then you're also going to bubble in your answers to the question. Just like the multiple choice questions, there's no penalty for answering a gridded response question incorrectly. And so you also, for these ones, you never want to leave a question blank. Make another note on this one that says your answer must fit into the 4 available boxes on the grid. So whatever you get as an answer for this question, it has to fit into those 4 squares that are available for you to use to write your answer to the question. When it comes to the different kinds of math that is tested on the SAT math test, there are 4 different focuses. The first one's called Heart of Algebra. Out of the 58 questions on the SAT math test, there are 19 total questions that come from Heart of Algebra, and the list of what topics are tested is written right here. So linear equations, systems of linear equations, functions, creating equations, solving inequalities, and solving systems of linear equations are some of the topics that are tested on the Heart of Algebra questions that are on the SAT math test. The blue checks on the screen here show which of these we've covered in our class this year. And so as you look at these, this year in our class, we've taken notes on and practiced all of these different topics. You may also recognize that some of these topics are topics that you've learned about in previous year's math classes as well. So when you're preparing for the SAT, you're going to use your notes from our math class this year, but you're also going to potentially use notes from previous year's classes to help you prepare to answer questions from these topics. The second focus for topics for the SAT math test are problem solving and data analysis. Out of the 58 questions on the test, 17 of them come from this focus, include ratios, percentages, proportional reasoning, units like unit rates and conversions, describing relationships that are shown graphically, so interpreting graphs, analyzing statistical data, and then some questions about probability. And so here, looking at the blue check marks, these are the ones that we've specifically covered in our class this year. So again, our course has covered in some capacity each of the topics that are tested here on the problem solving and data analysis questions on the SAT math test. The third focus is called Passport to Advanced Math. And so out of the 58 questions on the test, 16 of them come from this section, identifying and creating equivalent algebraic expressions, and then creating, solving, and graphing quadratic functions, exponential functions, and other nonlinear functions. And again, in our class this year, we've covered each of these topics at some point throughout the year. So you'll use your notes from our math class this year to help you while you're preparing to take the SAT. There's a fourth focus called Additional Topics in Math. Out of the 58 questions on the SAT math test, 6 questions come from this section. So it's the least tested out of the bunch. Topics that are tested here include area and volume, and then applying definitions and theorems related to lines, angles, triangles, circles, trigonometry, and the unit circle. And again, in our class this year, we've covered each of these topics to some degree. When it comes to scoring the SAT test, each of the 2 sections of the SAT is scored on a scale of 200 to 800. So 200 being the minimum and 800 being the maximum that you can get on each section of the test. And so to get your total SAT score, those 2 section scores are added together. Make a note here that your score on the math portion of the SAT makes up half your overall score on the test. So it is important to study for and do your best on the math test so that you can get the highest overall score you can on the SAT. The highest possible combined SAT score is 1600, so that's the maximum score that you can receive on the test. When it comes to taking the SAT test, there are some things that you can do to prepare. With regard to the math test, it is generally understood that the best way to prepare for the SAT is by working hard in your math courses throughout high school. No fancy SAT prep class can help get you ready for the test more than just working hard in your regular classes can. However, looking beyond that, there are some ways that you can help yourself get ready for the test. One is to start early, so make sure that you start doing prep well in advance of the date that you plan on taking the test. Paying attention in class, like we mentioned above, is another good thing that you can do because your high school classes are all designed to help get you ready to learn the material that you need to be able to do when you take the SAT math test. There's also lots of SAT prep that's available online. There are SAT prep books that you can buy. Khan Academy has a free SAT prep online platform that you can use to study that College Board recommends using. It's also recommended that at some point before you take the SAT, you sit down and take a full-length SAT practice test so that you can have the experience of the time limit with answering the questions. The SAT test goes very quickly. And then the last note here is to make sure that you know what to expect on test day. Make a note on the lines for this one that it's important that before the day of the test, you review your testing location, you review the parking, you review what to bring with you, like pencils and an eraser and a calculator, your ID, all of those things. And you want to make sure that you do this before the morning of the test. And so you want to make sure that you take some of the worry off of you by knowing the details about how, when, and where you'll take the test. That way, the day of the test, you can just focus on doing your best and answering the questions. In our class over the next few weeks, we're going to be doing some prep to get ready for the SAT. Many juniors will take the SAT this June, and so hopefully you'll find the prep that we do over the next few weeks to be helpful in helping you get ready, whether you're taking it this year or whether you're taking it next year.